Good evening, I'm Katie Wilson and you are watching A News. Here are your top stories for tonight. 3 killed in Ukraine's Pavlorad as country mourns the victims of a previous attack which took 12 lives. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva warns of a major test for the global economy. EU High Representative and Vice President of the European Commission Kaja Kallas visits Baku. Russian drones attacked the Ukrainian city of Pavlorad, killing 3 people and injuring 14 others. The attack damaged homes and left a crater in the middle of a residential street. The strike follows the deadly bombardments in Kyiv on Thursday, where 12 civilians were killed and dozens were injured. Today, Ukrainians are in mourning. Candles flicker on makeshift memorials, while families gather in silence, grieving yet another day of war and loss. A senior Russian military officer was killed in a car explosion east of Moscow, according to Russia's investigative committee. The officer was identified as Yaroslav Moskalik, the main operations directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces. He was killed when a homemade explosive device detonated. Russia's investigative committee has opened a criminal case, but no suspects have been named. Moskalik, a major general, had participated in several high-level Russian delegations. This follows a series of high-ranking Russian military assassinations since the start of the war in Ukraine. US President Donald Trump's special envoy was in Moscow on Friday for talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Trump administration is attempting to broker a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine and normalize relations with Moscow, but a number of obstacles remain. Our correspondent in Washington, Ubi Shabandar, has more.
President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff is back in the Kremlin, where he will meet Russian leader Vladimir Putin and his senior advisors. This is the 4th meeting between Witkoff and Putin. Trump has presented to both Ukraine and Russia what he calls a final offer to end the war, which will include U.S. recognition of Crimea as part of Russia and unofficial recognition of Russian de facto control of most of the areas that Russian forces have occupied in Ukraine since the 2022 attack. The Trump administration is hoping to gain buy-in by Moscow and Kyiv for a U.S.-backed ceasefire and peace initiative that had been a major priority for President Trump since taking office. Earlier, Trump publicly chastised the Russian president after a deadly wave of missile and airstrikes in Kyiv that killed and injured dozens of civilians. Trump called the Russian attacks unnecessary and not conducive for achieving a peace deal. Earlier, President Trump had been critical of Ukrainian President Zelensky for his remarks that rejected U.S. recognition of Russian control over the occupied Crimea Peninsula. Trump has said that Crimea, which Russian forces captured and annexed in 2014, will stay with Russia. The Ukrainian side is pushing for a meeting between Zelensky and Trump in Rome on the sidelines of the funeral for Pope Francis, though there are no signs yet that the American side is willing. Ukraine has rejected the U.S. proposal and has offered a counter-proposal, according to European diplomats. Steve Witkoff has emerged as President Trump's most trusted foreign policy advisor and is also heavily involved in ongoing negotiations with Iran. The Trump administration hopes that talks with Iran can result in a diplomatic resolution to ongoing Western concerns that Iran is covertly working towards building a nuclear weapon. After Russia, Witkoff will be meeting with the Iranian officials this weekend for a second round of talks with that country. I'm Ube Shabander in Washington, D.C., A News.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says the US and European allies agree that Russia is a long-term threat to NATO. After talks with President Trump on Thursday, Rutte said that all NATO members agree that Russia poses a long-term threat to NATO territory in the entire Euro-Atlantic area. He also reassured that despite Washington's growing focus on the Asia-Pacific, the United States remains committed to NATO.
You meant the Russian president? Yeah. Yes. So I worked with him for 4 years between...
In his recent interview with Time magazine, President Trump discussed a range of topics, including his stance on tariffs and trade imbalances, his critical approach to China, and his views on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war.
In an exclusive interview with Time magazine, US President Donald Trump delved into key issues, including tariffs, US-China relations, the Russia-Ukraine war, and Middle East tensions, offering fresh insights into his administration's approach. Trump blamed the Biden administration for the US losing $2 trillion in trade, calling it unsustainable and asserting that the country was carrying other nations on its back. He criticised past trade deals, particularly with China. He highlighted his administration's response by imposing tariffs on China, totaling hundreds of billions of dollars, as a way to address these unfair trade practices. Trump stressed that while the market fluctuates, the US is poised to bring in substantial revenue, with high tariffs considered a total victory for the country's long-term prosperity. He explained that the tariffs, especially on China and India, are part of his strategy to rebuild the US economy, pointing out the return of manufacturing jobs and companies coming back to the US. President Trump also claimed that Chinese President Xi Jinping had called him, but this was later disputed by a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson who stated that the characterization of the call was inaccurate. Turning to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Trump called his previous statement about ending the war on day one a figurative exaggeration. He remarked that the war, which has persisted for 3 years, would never have happened under his presidency, attributing the escalation to President Biden's actions. Trump also said Crimea will stay with Russia, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky understands that, and everybody understands that it's been with them for a long time. Trump attributed the escalation in Gaza to the Biden administration, blaming them for allowing Iran to regain financial power by lifting sanctions. He claimed that under his administration, Iran was broke, which prevented funding for groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. However, under Biden, Iran accumulated $300 billion, enabling them to support terrorism again. Trump also addressed the possibility of direct talks with Iran, confirming he would be open to meeting with its leaders. Regarding Israel's stance on Iran, Trump denied stopping Israel from attacking Iran's nuclear sites, but emphasized that he preferred diplomacy over military action. US President shared his vision for the Middle East, indicating his diplomatic successes like the Abraham Accords and the Saudi-Israeli normalization process. He took credit for crippling Iran's financial capacity to fund terrorism and stated that under his administration, Iran was broke. However, he warned that if diplomacy fails, he would not hesitate to act to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons.
Joining me now is Professor Alexei Haran from Kyiv University. Thanks for being with us, Alexei. So, in this interview, Trump points to the Obama administration as being responsible for handing Crimea over to the Russians. What's your reaction to this?
Well, we know this tactic not only for Trump, but for many other, presidents who are blaming their predecessors. Everything what's going bad in the country or international relations is considered to be the result of predecessors' policy. Well, to tell you that, to be objective, I would say that a reaction of Obama to what happened in Crimea in 2014 was really very weak, in the same way as the reaction of European countries. Yes, they imposed sanctions, but these sanctions were not very effective. That's true. Stronger sanctions actually came after, in summer 2014, civilian airplane was MH17 was shot by terrorists with Russian arms over in the skies of Donbass. And after that, because it couldn't be ignored, actually all Western countries, they started to introduce more serious sanctions, including financial sector, including oil and gas sanctions, which were quite serious, I would say. But actually, what Trump is saying right now, doesn't matter what Obama did. Please explain what you are doing. Because, to not only to try to establish, re-establish economic relations with Putin, Trump actually is going to reward aggressor, to accept totally illegitimate occupation of the territory of sovereign state. In this sense, Trump behaves like, who can be compared to, like Chamberlain or French Daladier in Munich, 1938, when they give part of Czechoslovakia to Hitler. And it didn't stop Hitler. Hitler next year, occupied all Czechoslovakia. So the very, word Munich means that something really bad, which is done as an appeasement policy. What Trump is doing, he is doing the same. These are statements. Again, to be honest with you, I will also say that so far, Trump didn't lift sanctions against Russia. Moreover, he actually extended sanctions which were imposed by whom? By Biden. He extended the sanctions. However, yes, there is a danger that he may lift sanctions. Yes.
Something you mentioned that I want to follow up on is appeasement. And if we do get to a scenario where Ukraine agrees to give up its territory and that becomes a reality, you've sort of touched on this already, but would Putin stop there?
What will stop Putin?
Would Putin stop if Ukraine does give up some territory?
This is a good question, and you perhaps know the answer. Appeasement of aggressor doesn't work. The more aggressor gets, the more he wanted. So basically, again, example of Hitler and what actually, when we're talking about Russia, again, Russia aggression in Georgia wasn't stopped, Russian aggression in Syria, then Russian aggression in Crimea, Russian aggression in Donbass, and finally full-scale war. So it is escalated. So we think actually that Putin will use, kind of ceasefire or even peace agreement if we reach it, in order to regroup his forces and to strike back again. He cannot live with independent and sovereign Ukraine. This is in his mind. This is Russian imperialism. No, actually, Russia colonial empire is trying to come back, and we don't want to do that. So, look, we understand, we in Ukraine, we understand that at this point, unfortunately, we do not have enough weapons and enough support from our allies to liberate the country, unfortunately. The moment was lost. It existed at the end of 2022 when Ukraine conducted very successful counteroffensive. But then we stopped. We didn't have enough weapons. So we understand we cannot liberate it now by military means. But so if we are talking about ceasefire, well, we understand that it will mean that de facto Russia will continue to occupy these territories for some time. But from legal point of view, the jure, Ukraine will never cross this red line. Moreover, I will tell you that international community will not cross this red line. Why? Because it will be upset of the whole international order which was created after World War II. So you know that in the United Nations, more than 140 countries voted for territorial integrity of Ukraine, and only 5-4 against. The other abstained, unfortunately. But in general, I would say that this, Crimea as the Russian one, will not be accepted by international community. Because again, it will provoke not only Putin, it will provoke other states to aggression. China. This would be a good precedent for China to start a war somewhere. It will be again good precedent, bad precedent for international community, but good precedent for North Korea, Iran, and other aggressive states. So that's why it's not only a Ukrainian problem, it's a problem of the whole world to stop Putin.
It's always a pleasure to chat to you, Alexei. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
President Trump expressed confidence that US negotiations with Iran over its nuclear program are advancing well. Speaking from the Oval Office, he stated that the talks are on track for a positive outcome, which could save lives with a deal potentially within reach. Ahead of further discussions in Oman this weekend, Trump reiterated that the negotiations are progressing within the 60-day window that he set. He also mentioned that additional countries will soon join the Abraham Accords. IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva says China must tackle its property crisis, expand social protections, and empower the private sector to boost long-term growth. She also warned that Southeast Asian economies are vulnerable to US trade tensions and should strengthen regional trade. Georgieva also stressed that central bank independence is vital for global stability. However, she highlighted that the global economy is entering challenging times.
Warm welcome to. We have significantly downgraded our projections for global growth. Major trade policy shifts have spiked uncertainty off the charts, accompanied by tighter financial conditions and higher market volatility. Simply put, the world economy is facing a new and major test. And it faces it with policy buffers depleted by the shocks of recent years.
Turkey is pushing to ease trade barriers with the United States. Trade Minister Ömer Bolat says he will formally request the removal of a 10% tariff during his upcoming visit to Washington next month. The announcement comes as Turkey continues to expand its global trade strategy.
Turkish Trade Minister announced that he will formally request the removal of a 10% tariff imposed by the United States during his upcoming visit to Washington next month. Bolat made a statement during his visit to Japan, where he's leading a delegation of government officials and private sector representatives aimed at boosting economic cooperation. Speaking at the Osaka Expo 2025, Bolat underlined that Turkey and the United States maintain a strong trade partnership. He pointed out that the bilateral trade is currently balanced, with the United States enjoying a trade surplus. According to Bolat, this makes the 10% tariff imposed by Washington an unnecessary measure, since such protections typically target countries with which the United States has a trade deficit. Bolat said the removal of the tariff will be a concrete demand during his meetings in Washington. He also highlighted Turkey's Far Countries strategy, which focuses on increasing trade with distant markets, particularly in the Americas. The long-term goal, Bolat noted, is to raise the bilateral trade volume with the United States to $100 billion. Turning to broader concerns, the minister warned that ongoing uncertainty in global trade could have long-term negative consequences. He expressed hope that more countries will recognize the risks of shrinking trade and will instead work toward a multilateral global trade system governed by shared rules and common sense. Bolat emphasized that declining trade ultimately leads to a drop in global income, a situation that benefits no one.
The funeral of Pope Francis, the first Latin American pontiff, takes place on Saturday in St. Peter's Square. The 88-year-old died on Monday after suffering a stroke. Over 200,000 mourners and 130 delegations, including 50 world leaders, are expected to attend the Pope's funeral.
Pope Francis, the first Latin American pontiff, will be laid to rest Saturday in St. Peter's Square, Vatican City, after his death at 88 from a stroke. Around 130 delegations and 50 heads of state are confirmed to attend his funeral, including U.S. President Donald Trump and leaders from Argentina, Italy, France, Germany, the UK, Ukraine, Brazil, and EU institutions. Residents and visitors come to mourn for the Pope, with around 200,000 people expected to attend his funeral.
It's a very strong feeling to be here. He's the only Pope we've had who came from South America, a Pope who had many good intentions for the Catholic Church. He cleaned up all the bad, maybe not all of it, but he tried. He was a big part of the lives of Catholics, like me. This farewell was very sad, but I thank God that I was able to see him.
I feel a lot of emotion. I am grateful to come here to greet Pope Francis.
Francis will be the first pope to be buried outside of the Vatican, as he requested to be laid to rest at the Basilica di Santa Maria Maggiore. Cardinals continued to meet in daily general congregations to discuss the qualities needed in the next pontiff. While it's too early to conclave decisions, 113 of the 252 cardinals have already gathered, with more arriving.
We will pay homage to Pope Francis and show recognition for his work. He was a free man who loved people. He humanized the Church without desacralizing it.
Cardinal Francois Javier Bustillo described the mood among cardinals as one of trust and hope. They will decide whether to continue Francis's progressive reforms or shift to conservatism. Only cardinals under 80 can vote in the conclave, set to determine the future of the 1.4 billion member Roman Catholic Church. A conclave is not expected to begin before May 6.
In Baku, President Ilham Aliyev and First Lady Mehriban Aliyeva paid a heartfelt visit to the Church of the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Virgin Mary to offer condolences following the passing of Pope Francis. The President and the First Lady were welcomed by the Apostolic Prefect of the Catholic Church in Azerbaijan. They signed the Book of Condolences and shared a moment of remembrance. President Aliyev recalled his past meetings with Pope Francis, including the Pontiff's visit to Baku and his historic meeting with leaders of different religious communities at the Haydar Mosque, a moment the President described as a powerful symbol of unity. He praised the late Pope as a humble and compassionate leader who deeply connected with ordinary people. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev received Kaja Kallas, High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. The meeting highlighted strong EU-Azerbaijan ties, especially in the energy sector. Kallas expressed the EU's interest in deepening cooperation, calling Azerbaijan a reliable partner. President Aliyev noted the success of the Southern Gas Corridor and stressed Azerbaijan's expanding role in renewable energy and regional transport. Both sides also discussed efforts to ensure long-term peace in the South Caucasus and the ongoing normalization process between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Azerbaijan expects Armenia to drop territorial claims and dismantle obsolete Minsk Group structures as part of the peace process. That's according to Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov, who spoke at a press conference following his meeting with Kallas. He pointed to key concerns, including Armenia's need to eliminate constitutional provisions which challenge Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. Bayramov also highlighted the ongoing landmine issues in Azerbaijan's post-conflict areas, underscoring the urgent need for broader EU support. Kallas welcomed progress on a draft peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan and reaffirmed the EU's commitment to lasting peace. She also pledged continued EU assistance for demining and reconstruction efforts, underlining Azerbaijan's important role for the EU.
Of course, colleagues from the European Union are well aware of Azerbaijan's position. Azerbaijan's stance is not a new one. It has been on the table for over 2 years. Among the key issues is, first and foremost, the expectation that Armenia removes claims against Azerbaijan's territorial integrity and sovereignty from its constitution through the necessary amendments. At the same time, there is the matter of abolishing the structures related to the Minsk process, which no longer hold any functional relevance. In this regard, steps are currently expected from Armenia.
Azerbaijan is an important partner in the region. It's an appreciated energy partner for the European Union, and together we have made significant progress in strengthening our ties. You have helped the European Union to diversify its energy supplies and strengthen our own energy security at the time when the world is facing unprecedented challenges. We are also grateful for Azerbaijan's humanitarian support for Ukraine and for your leadership in hosting the COP29 climate summit last year. Multilateral efforts like these show that when countries work together, we can make a real impact.
Well, to discuss the visit, I'm joined by Hussein Sultani. Thank you very much for joining us. So, Kalas's visit comes after President Aliyev's historic state visit to China. So, within Azerbaijan's geopolitical balancing act, where does the EU fit in?
Thank you for the invitation. As you mentioned, Azerbaijan pursues a balanced foreign policy which attempts to, diversify its engagements with the world. I think the underlying point is that as long as Azerbaijan's territorial integrity is respected and Azerbaijan feels that its contribution is valued, it is open for cooperation with any actor. As was mentioned already, both in the energy and transport sectors, Azerbaijan-EU ties are significant. Azerbaijan supplies gas to 10 different EU countries, and in addition to that, Azerbaijan serves as an important plays an important role in the middle corridor, which is very important for the EU's geopolitical plans in the near future. There is hope that the meeting that took place today will serve as a turning point, especially because in recent times Azerbaijan has noted that on behalf of the European Union, the approach towards the country was not always fair and biased. So there is significant hope that in the future a page will be turned.
So one thing that Kalas touched upon was normalisation. And how serious do you think the EU's commitment is to facilitating peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia? And also, what role will Turkish-Armenian normalisation play within this?
There are concerns in Azerbaijan about the EU's role, especially because, as I mentioned, the priority for Azerbaijan is to ensure that its territorial, the respect for its territorial integrity is comprehensive. Azerbaijan hopes that the EU's position with regards to the normalization process changes because it has noted certain counterproductive trends which have, in a way, limited the ability of the sides to proceed in the peace process. Recently, the EU wanted to arrange aid to Armenia, for example, and there's also some concern about the European mission in Armenia and the extent to which it will be able to contribute to peace, especially taking into consideration that there are, certain parts of Armenian society and political society that are not necessarily on the same page with regards to the peace process. With regards to Turkey and Armenia normalization, of course, Turkey and Armenia normalization will be positive for EU-Azerbaijan relations because it will facilitate the further development of transport projects such as the Middle Corridor. So, however, Turkey has made clear that its normalization track with Armenia depends on the ability of Azerbaijan and Armenia to sign a peace deal, which on its own depends on Armenia's acceptance of Azerbaijan's several key conditions, such as changes to its constitution and the unconditional removal of territorial claims to Azerbaijani territory.
Really interesting insights there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Azerbaijan's foreign minister has called the Minsk Group obsolete, urging the organisation to eliminate its related structures. At a joint press conference in Baku, the OSCE Secretary-General reaffirmed the organisation's commitment to long-term cooperation with Azerbaijan in support for the regional peace process.
There is no logic in the existence of the OSCE Minsk Group, Azerbaijan's Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov said at a joint press conference with OSCE Secretary-General Feridun Sinirlioglu. He conveyed to the opposite side Azerbaijan's demand for the elimination of the Minsk Group and related institutions.
The OSCE Minsk Group was created specifically to resolve the Karabakh conflict, and our territory has already been liberated from occupation. Therefore, there is no logic in maintaining the Minsk Group. If Armenia is truly interested in fully resolving the issue, it should not insist on continuing the activities of the Minsk Group and related structures.
The OSCE commits to long-term cooperation with Azerbaijan, OSCE Secretary-General Feridun Sinirlioglu said at a joint press conference with Azerbaijan's Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov.
I want to reiterate the message I shared with my counterparts in Armenia and Georgia just a few days ago. Dialogue and diplomacy must remain the cornerstone of our efforts if we are to achieve a sustainable peace, a lasting peace, one that upholds the principles of the OSCE, including respect to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. In this context, I commend the successful conclusion of the negotiations on the peace treaty between Azerbaijan and Armenia.
OSCE Secretary-General also stated that the OSCE will support the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and also organisation is ready to provide support to Azerbaijan on strategic issues.
This year's Space Technology Conference has concluded in Baku. The event brought together professionals from the aerospace industry across numerous countries, providing a platform for communication and cooperation. Our very own Anastasia Lavrina has more.
Today, April 25, the fourth Space Technology Conference concluded in Baku, marking a major milestone for international collaboration in space. Organized by the Space Agency of the Republic of Azerbaijan, event brought together around 400 delegates from 35 countries, transforming Baku into a vibrant regional hub for dialogue, innovation and strategic partnership.
Azerbaijan is one of the focus countries in this region, and this conference was very efficient. We had a lot of meetings, and really I would like to thank to Azercosmos for their very nice host to us, and of course the Azerbaijan government.
The conference underscored Azerbaijan's growing influence as a bridge between continents and a key player in shaping the future of global space engagement. One of the central themes of the conference was the role of satellites in ecological monitoring. Experts emphasized how satellite technologies are critical for tracking climate change, deforestation and natural disasters, delivering precise real-time data that supports sustainable development, environmental protection and resilience planning across regions. Throughout the two-day event, numerous agreements were signed, a new partnership were for the groundwork for collaborative projects in satellite communications, Earth observation and space-based data services.
We have been working with Azercosmos for the last 5 years in Pakistan. Both of us, Azercosmos and Supernet Global, so trying to export their services outside their original homeland boundaries. So that makes a very well synergy among both of us. So we plan together. So we have signed an MOU in this conference, which is for Supernet particularly is a very, I would say, milestone achieved. And the focus and the idea is to take our partnership beyond what we have been doing, cross boundaries for both of us.
But perhaps the most powerful message to emerge was the space is no longer a distant frontier, It's a platform for cooperation, innovation and shared progress.
For us, this event is an important place to be, to meet other ones who are in the satellite communication business as well, set up new cooperations, new contacts, and see how we can work together with them in the future.
In a symbolic closing ceremony, the term of the conference was officially passed to Uzbekistan, which will host the 5th Space Technology Conference in 2026. This marks not only the continuation of a regional tradition, but a deepening commitment to collaboration and leadership within the rapidly evolving space sector. As the conference draws to a close, the message from Baku is clear: the future of space belongs to all. With each step, the region is playing a greater role in guiding that further together. And from here in Azerbaijan, the next chapter is already underway.
As the world grapples with a resurgence of measles outbreaks, with cases on the rise even in the United States, Afghanistan is facing an alarming surge of its own, according to the World Health Organization. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
In its latest report, the World Health Organization has revealed a staggering 42% increase in measles cases across Afghanistan in the month of March alone. This sharp spike comes amid growing concerns about the country's already fragile healthcare system. But measles isn't the only threat. The WHO also reports rising cases of acute diarrhea, malaria and Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, all of which has increased compared to February. Yet it is measles that leads the surge with the steepest rise among all reported diseases. Can a country already stretched thin handle another health crisis? And what happens when even the world's wealthiest nations are struggling to contain the same virus? To support ongoing efforts, the WHO says it is providing assistance to 123 healthcare centers across 20 provinces, as well as 3 hospitals. But even this help may not last long. The organization has previously warned that due to budget shortages, 80% of these WHO-supported health facilities could be forced to shut down by June. With healthcare access hanging by a thread and infections on the rise, the question is not just whether Afghanistan can withstand this wave, but whether the world can afford to look away. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
It existed on maps but remained out of reach for years. Today, Kalbajar welcomes travellers from across the world. Through the Nomad Mania Club's international expedition, these footsteps are witnessing both the past and the future of this land.
Kalbajar, once marked on maps but lost to the world, today this land stands proud, now welcoming travellers from every corner of the globe. As part of the Nomad Mania International Travel Club's expedition, dozens of foreign travellers visited various points in Kalbajar, including the city centre, famous Istisu Sanatorium and the Bashlibel village.
Shusha had so much history. I really enjoyed learning about the woman who was the princess and the role that she played in arts. I have to say, though, my favorite thing was going to the university, and the students there just really impressed me. They were so enthusiastic and smart and really wanted to learn. And what I thought was special about that university was they want to do things that are really focused on the region and giving back and helping to develop the region. Particularly like the innovation hub that he described was very interesting to me. And then now driving through this river valley and seeing the hydroelectric power that's being developed for the region and the tourism, you can clearly see how that will come with like the kind of ski village. But I loved the geology, just one little microclimate after another of different interesting things around geology was very cool.
The visitors were captivated not only by Kalbajar's stunning landscapes, but also by its rich, intricate history.
First time in Azerbaijan, I like it a lot. I'm really impressed from all the development that you have done in the new era. This new area of Karabakh. It's really great.
I think the government has done a fantastic job of rebuilding the place. What has happened over the last few years has obviously been very sad, very painful, but the government is definitely trying to look forward and plan for the future. You see it with all the buildings that are coming up, all the facilities that are coming up, and most importantly, the people here are some of the most hospitable people we've ever encountered. Everyone is so happy to see us, so welcoming, and I think a combination of all these factors will make Karabakh a really beautiful place for everyone to visit in the future.
Here, beauty and sorrow coexist. The towering mountains, rugged paths and quiet villages are silent witnesses to the hardships this land has overcome.
I see the blossoms, the trees, the white flowers, so it looks like bright future, but we see the destroyed buildings, yeah, and it should be horrible times, and usually you cannot see in the world, anywhere in the world. So I was in every country in the world, so, and it's not many places you can see this. Maybe this is the most horrible example for me, because it's these flowers and with these houses, yeah, so I'm happy, yes, I'm happy that there is a peace here.
I was here in 22.
The Nomad Mania expedition moves on to Fuzuli and Lachin, key locations in Karabakh's modern history. This marks the 13th trip since Azerbaijan allowed international travellers to enter. The aim is to present the region as both a site of destruction and a symbol of recovery. Through dark tourism, the expedition highlights the region's historical and social transformation.
From the 13th to 15th of May, Baku will host the International Air Transport Association Aviation Energy Forum, marking the first time this prominent event is held in the Caucasus region.
In May, Baku will host the International Air Transport Association Aviation Energy Forum, marking the first time this prominent event is held in the Caucasus region. Supported by Azerbaijan Airlines, the forum will bring together global leaders to address energy and sustainability challenges in the aviation industry. Key topics will include aviation decarbonization, the adoption of sustainable fuel sources, and the broader energy transition within the sector. The three-day forum is expected to welcome around 60 countries and more than 65 airlines, totaling nearly 700 registered participants. Delegates will include top airline executives, fuel industry leaders, and sustainability experts. The event will also spotlight Azerbaijan's green economy initiatives, its logistics and transit potential, and its evolving role in energy diplomacy. Hosting this forum highlights Azerbaijan's growing international stature in both the aviation and energy sectors, while reinforcing its commitment to innovation and sustainability.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.